In today's video, I will be showing you how to apply a toner transfer resist to a piece of sterling silver for an etching we will be doing in the next video. We start by creating a design or finding a clip art design available for personal or commercial use. In this particular design, this is how our finished product will look. The white areas are the raised areas of the finished piece, and the black areas are the recessed areas. When a patina is applied and then removed, the recessed areas will retain the patina and you will see a nice contrast between them that makes the design easy to see. When applying a resist, we apply toner to the areas we do not want to etch. So we need to invert our image so the black areas will not be etched and the white areas will etch away. I worked on my design in a larger size than needed so I could easily see the details, but now I will resize it to the finished size I want. In this case, I want the width of the piece to be 1.75 inches, so I resize it to that size. I want to make multiple copies of my design, so when I print it out, I have more than one to choose from in case there are some that print better than others, and so that I have more I can use at a later time and I don't waste paper. I'm spending time duplicating my images and aligning them. This is not necessary, but I find it easier to have the multiples, and if they are aligned, I can easily cut them out with plenty of space around them. I have a Silhouette Curio, so Silhouette Studio happens to be the program I generally use when I create or edit my images and ready them for printing. You can use whatever program you prefer. We will not get into how to use image editing programs since that is beyond the scope of this video. I like to use glossy magazine paper for my transfers. Some people prefer to use P&P paper, but I have had good results with this method. The trick is to find the right magazine paper to use. Luckily, I get a monthly magazine for free from my community that works perfectly for me. The magazine paper must be glossy and should have a good weight to it. Since we will be printing directly on this paper, you will want to find a page that is lighter in color so we can actually see the print we make. A dark page like this will make it very difficult, if not impossible, to see what you have printed. So we need to find a much lighter page. This one could work. Let's see what else we can find. This is a good light page to use for your print. Once you have found a suitable page, just rip it out of the magazine and you're good to go. The trick to toner transfer is that you must use a laserjet printer. Inkjet printers will not work for this method. Just slip your magazine paper into the paper feed in whichever orientation is required for the images to print on the light side of the paper. Now we can come back to our image editing software and print the image. You want to print at the best quality possible to get as much toner on the page as possible. Play around with your particular printer settings to get the best results. It looks like all of our images printed really well, so we can choose one to cut out to apply to our sterling silver. So I'm just going to carefully cut around one of the images, and I like to actually cut out as close to the image as possible, obviously without cutting into the image. It just allows me to more easily see how large that image is when I place it on the sterling silver sheet, and I can get it aligned better. Here's my sheet of sterling silver, and we can see that the image easily fits on this sheet. In fact, I'll cut it down a little bit so that I'm not wasting any metal. The measurement of this sheet is 1.02 millimeters, and I was going for an 18 gauge. This happens to be one that I melted down and rolled out myself. I wanted to make sure that it was 18 gauge, and we can see by my chart here that 18 gauge is 1.02 millimeters. And I like to use that thickness when I'm etching. I'll use typically an 18 gauge or a 20 gauge, but 18 gauge is really nice for what I want to do with this particular piece. Before we get started applying the toner to the metal, we need to make sure that it is nice and clean. And I like to use gloves for this because once it's cleaned, then I don't want to touch the piece again and transfer any oils from my fingers back to the metal. I happen to have an ultrasonic cleaner that I have an ammonia solution in. You don't have to have an ultrasonic cleaner. You can just mix up this solution and make sure that it's heated and just scrub the piece really well. I typically will start with a brass brush and scrub it down really well. And then I'll switch over to a green Scotch-Brite pad. What I'm trying to do here is just get rid of all of the dirt and oils that have accumulated on the piece. You want it as clean as possible because if there are any dirty spots or oily spots, the toner won't transfer to it properly. It may not adhere. And by using this Scotch-Brite pad as well, you will give it a little bit of a tooth, and that also helps the toner adhere to the piece. After we clean the piece, we want to rinse it really well. And at this stage, you can also tell if you have missed any spots when you were cleaning it. You want the water to just sheet off of the metal. And if there are any spots where it kind of bubbles up or leaves any little spots and doesn't sheet off, then you know you need to go back and clean it again. In this case, we got it pretty clean and the water just sheets off of it. That looks really clean. Now we need heat to transfer the toner to the metal, and I like to use a laminator. Mine's pretty old school. I've probably had it for a good 20 plus years. But mine has a foil setting, and that's the hottest setting. So I turn it on to get it ready. And while I'm doing that, I use denatured alcohol to clean off the metal sheet, just to get rid of anything else that may be left on that piece of metal. Just wipe down the metal with the denatured alcohol. And I like to go in one direction so that I don't get lint on the sheet. And then you take your transfer piece and you flip it upside down so that the toner is face down. Get it aligned. And then I take that still damp towel and I just press down over the top of that piece of paper, piece of magazine, so then I can kind of press it down. It helps hold it in place until you get it placed into your carrier sheet. And if the backside is a light color, you can even see the toner come through. And then I have a carrier sheet. Your laminator will probably come with one. I lost mine a long time ago, so I had to use something else. It's like a kind of a wax paper, but you just press it into the laminator and let it pull it through. I like to pass the metal through at least 5 times, and that just makes sure that the toner is adhering well to the metal. Be careful when you pull this sheet out. It does get very hot and it can burn you, so just proceed with caution. As I stated, the piece gets very hot, so really be careful when you're picking this up. But at this point, you've passed it through about 5 times, so it should be well adhered. And I usually set it aside for just a few minutes to let it cool down a bit. But while you're waiting for that to cool, get a container of water, and then after it's cooled, just dip the piece in water. You can let it soak for a little bit, but it's not absolutely necessary. But you just want to start gently running your thumb over the top of that piece. And as you do that, then the paper from the magazine will start to rub away, but it will leave the toner behind. The idea here is that you rub away the paper and you leave all of the toner still on the metal. If you find that the toner is coming away as well, then you may need to pass it through the laminator more than 5 times. but it shouldn't be necessary. It should have adhered well enough. And if that happens at this point, you'll have to completely start over. You'll need to clean the piece off completely with your Scotch-Brite pad and reapply it. So we just gently rub the paper and it will slowly remove it. And the gloves actually help. So we're just working that paper off of the piece and leaving the toner behind. Keep working it until you get all of the paper off. This will sometimes take a while to do. And you definitely don't want to scrape it off. You don't want to use any tools other than your fingers. You can see we've gotten all of the paper off. At times you'll still see a haze on the piece, like you see at the top and on the right edge there. That doesn't hurt. Just make sure that the parts where we don't want toner, there's no paper left. But a haze over the piece is not going to affect the etching over those black areas, especially once you dry it. It'll kind of get a gray cast to it. So we dry the piece off really well, and then we'll want to take it back over to the carrier page. Because we might have roughed up that toner just a bit by rubbing it off the paper, we want to run it back through the laminator. I use a piece of glossy paper. This is actually the back of vinyl to put over on top of it, because that toner can transfer back to that carrier page. So you want something on top of it so that the toner will not stick to. And I find that that's really a good material that it won't stick to. And I run it back through the laminator about 3 times. And I'm just checking to make sure that the glossy paper that I put on top of it is still in place and covers the entire piece. And once I run it through here the 3 times, then we're ready to put a resist on the back side of it and finish preparing it for etching. I'm very happy with how well the toner transferred to the metal. Now we need to put a resist on the back so that it doesn't etch when we put it in the solution. We can use tape, or my favorite method is to use vinyl. And I like to use Oracal 651. It adheres really well. and it has a grid on the back, so it's easy to cut out a size, whatever size is needed. So I just lay my metal down, mark where I want to cut it, and then just cut the piece out to the size I need. So when I lay my sheet upside down, I like to use the back of a piece of that I removed from vinyl so that the front side doesn't get messed up in any way. And I find the trickiest part of this whole operation is just getting the back off of that vinyl. I'm going to have to remove my glove here just to give me some better leverage. And just carefully lay the vinyl onto the back of the sheet, just making sure that I cover the entire sheet of metal. Try not to get any bubbles in. It's inevitable. You typically always will. The smaller the piece, the easier it is. If you have a larger piece, it's next to impossible not to have bubbles. And I just pick it up and flip it over. And I like to take an X-Acto knife and just trim away the excess vinyl. I don't find that I need to cover the edges. Yes, it will etch away whatever's not covered. And a lot of people will tape the edges or put fingernail polish on the edges so that they don't get etched. But I leave enough of an edge on each side of my designs that it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to cut that away anyway. So to make it easy on myself, I just trim around that vinyl. I don't worry about the edges. I don't worry about the areas around the design. It'll etch that away, and I can actually use that as a template to saw away the excess metal. After I've applied the vinyl, I like to burnish it down just to make sure that none of the etching solution gets up underneath the vinyl. So I have an agate burnisher that I use, and I just burnish that down and along the edges. Just being careful not to scratch the other side of the piece. Now I need a way to hold it. I'm going to actually suspend it into my solution. So I cut a piece of string that I can suspend it from. I always tie knots in the end of the string. It helps hold the string to the back of the piece. I will put a piece of tape on the back of it to hold it in place. And without the knots, I have had it slip out of the the string slip off from me. So that's not good. I don't need to lose the piece in the etching solution. So I put 2 knots in it, one on each end. And then I get a piece of my clear packing tape and secure the string to the back of the piece. Cut my string long enough, whatever the length that you'll need to suspend it in your solution. And just get a piece of tape that's big enough don't really want a bunch of excess tape hanging off the edges. And just secure that string to the back. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Just press the tape around really well all around it, especially around the knots, to secure them in place and to make sure that the tape adheres to the vinyl. And now your piece is ready to go into your etching solution.